he came there and he was freaked out.
Yeah.
I said, what's going on? And all I could say is he was visited.
Yeah. That's what I think too.
And when he told me who visited him, my heart stops for a second. I'm like, get the fuck. And I'll never forget, he went, you believe me, right? You believe me, Jim, right? And I could, he's like, they came to me. And he said the names. I'm like, get the.
In this video, we're covering the biggest conspiracy in comedy, that Dave Chappelle isn't really Dave Chappelle. The conspiracy theory is basically this. Dave Chappelle was cloned or replaced with a different person when he up and left the United States and went to South Africa during the height of his fame in the mid-2000s. According to this theory, the Dave Chappelle that returned to the public eye after his hiatus is not the original Dave Chappelle, but rather a clone or a different person altogether. Jim Brewer is a longtime friend of Dave's, and on episode 131, his guest asked him about the conspiracy.
And then what about David Chappelle? You say that's not the same person that you used to know. So do you want to get, I don't mind getting into it. Do you think it's some MK Ultra celebrity playing his role? Do you think there's something deeper there? Do you think it's a clone? Dude, it's clearly not the same person.
It's I almost feel like I'll just say this. This is all I know. This is all I know. This is the God's honest truth. This is all I know. I know that Dave when Dave was visited, and that's up for him to tell that story. And that was my first real, like, what do you mean you were visited? And nobody talks about that. Everyone thinks he just ran away to Africa. And, the man was offered $50 million and he walked away.
The mainstream narrative is Dave walked away from a $50 million contract with Comedy Central in 2005 for several reasons, saying he felt uncomfortable with the direction of the Chappelle Show, mainly its racial humor and the pressure to produce content that he felt perpetuated stereotypes. So he just hopped on a plane and went to South Africa. The theorists out there think it's a different Dave because they think there is no way you can screw over Hollywood executives like he did, only to come back and do 7 Netflix specials.
Came back with 7 Netflix series. He just had a new Netflix and it was sponsored by Dave. That means David Chappelle sponsored the last 3 of these comedians that I've seen on Netflix. So someone who walked away from a deal on Oprah show, which I'm all about all of that, but then comes back and gets all of this, that's a different person.
With the Dave thing, I'd be a blatant liar if I were to say 100% that's him.
Okay, perfect.
Because our communication ended. And when I say he stopped communicating with me when he came back. And when I say came back, I'm not talking about from Africa, because the first thing he did was go on Oprah, which I find fascinating. And I highly suggest people really watch that interview intently.
So from a theorist's point of view, they wonder why the first thing Dave did was go on Oprah. He was really vague in the interview, but from what he said, it sounds like the people who had it out for him were able to control the narrative through the media. He says he knew something was going on when the papers published a story that said he had pneumonia. Then a day later, he had writer's block.
And then they put in the paper that I had pneumonia, or God knows what. Mm-hmm. It was walking pneumonia, because I was walking all over the place. I was relaxing. And then after that, I was coming back to the show, and then they were like, well, Dave, you should just back up the pneumonia story. And I was like, that was your thing. I'm not backing up a pneumonia story. And then the next day it was in the paper that I had writer's block. Then I knew something was getting ready to get stressful, because I hadn't even started writing. I was on the schedule to write. So I was like, what's going on? Are they going to...
So these are your people trying to feed?
Manipulate me. Sounds like somebody's trying to put young Dave in a compromising position. Oprah.
Dave said the negotiations made the relationship at work terrible. He said there was no more love, the vibes were just off, but he had considered leaving long before it got to that point. He said the people around him were trying to convince him that he was crazy and they wanted to put him on medication.
And I got worse, so when I said I'm not going to do it, then all of a sudden it was like, well, now he has walking pneumonia. And then I knew long before I walked, I had considered walking.
You had considered
I had considered walking because I went back to work and the vitamin love was gone because it was a real ugly negotiation. It's a situation where now everybody's taking credit for this and that and the other. It was getting ridiculous. And I knew I was going to leave, so I got ahead of schedule and I bounced. And I didn't tell anybody where I was going. The whole time, they're trying to convince me I'm insane. They were trying to get me to take psychotic medication. Yeah. Like I'm sitting around, I was stressed out, but the people that were telling me I was insane, I believe that they knew what was going on. So, this was troublesome.
Yeah.
I said, I'm not taking this medicine, man, because I know these people be trying to control you or maybe discredit you. I was afraid,
But you were stressed out. That's why.
There's no question. But it's very stressful for someone to constantly walk behind you and say, you're insane.
Later on in the interview, Oprah asked Dave if he told his family where he was going. He says he didn't tell anyone besides his brother, not even his wife and kids. On one hand, it seems suspicious, like if he was going to leave the country, the first person I would tell is my wife. On the other hand, maybe he didn't want to tell them anything as the people who were trying to ruin him were just that crazy, and he was trying to protect them by telling them as little as possible.
Did your family know?
No, I called my brother.
Yeah.
Me and my brother real cool. I called him up, was like, I'm going to Africa. He's like, cool, man, it's good.
Did your wife and children know where you're going?
No.
No, nobody knew.
No. I bounced.
Now, that sounds a little crazy.
It's not crazy because the situation kind of warranted it.
Jim Brewer said he actually sobbed when he saw that episode. After Dave came back, Jim says the communication basically ended, and he was never able to give a 100% answer if he thinks that's the real Dave or not.
And I sobbed. I fucking sobbed. Because I hope it's him. But I will say when he came back bigger.
Yep.
And I thought, all right, maybe he did steroids. Maybe he worked out like crazy. I know he was very self-conscious being skinny his whole life. And our communication ended. Now, I had a bizarre FaceTime thing, which, again, I think is very sketch. Even the person that, there was this, I'll just leave it this. I don't know.
After this episode, Jim went on Roseanne's podcast and talked about Dave again. Roseanne asked him what happened between them and if they had a falling out, and Jim gave an extra nugget on what happened with Dave, saying when the Chappelle show was popping off, he was approached by someone but wouldn't say who.
While he was on the show, when it was blowing up, and we remember the Aspen Comedy Festival? I don't know.
Yeah, that was fun. I did that too.
He came there and he was freaked out.
Yeah.
I said, what's going on? And all I could say is he was visited.
Yeah. That's what I think too.
And when he told me who visited him, my heart stops for a second. I'm like, get the fuck. And I'll never forget, he went, you believe me, right? You believe me, Jim, right? And I could, he's like, they came to me. And he said the names. I'm like, get the fuck. And what happened? And then all of a sudden, he went to Africa.
So once Dave came back, Jim talks about how the communication between them just fell off. He mentions that when he came back, he was bigger. But in that 2006 interview with Oprah, he seems like regular old Dave to me. He definitely swelled up later, but that's what someone looks like if they were to do tests. Jim says that's when he started to believe that it may not actually be Dave.
And so when I saw him come back, it was a lot less communication. And maybe he just, maybe he just grows, whatever. But I can honestly say, maybe I'm crazy and I am crazy for saying this. when I saw him completely come back, I really questioned if that was him.
Yeah, I know, right? I think that's.
And I know that's really crazy.
I think those same things. Yeah.
I know that's crazy.
It definitely sounds crazy, but it sounds a lot less crazy than it did 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago. I don't know if we're even on the same timeline anymore. Another reason this theory has kept going is because Dave's so-called cousin claims that he is a clone. There's a bunch of videos out there and articles about the claims, but I can't confirm if it's even Dave's cousin. It is weird to me that when he came back, he did Oprah, then Saturday Night Live, then got 7 Netflix specials, after apparently running away from some people in very high places. Let me know what you think in the comments.
Yeah, man.
Give me that